Aside from Fugo and Vento Aureo, there's also another character that kind of doesn't really do much, but for a good cause, I guess. I mean, we're talking about Abbacchio. When we're introduced to Abbacchio, we know that he used to be a cop, and while he was a cop, he ended up getting involved in some extra shit that he shouldn't have gotten involved with, and in the process, his partner ended up dying for him. So in order to forget about the fact that he pretty much got his partner killed in his place, he joins the gang after meeting Bruno and stuff, and that's where we are today. And overall, Abbacchio kind of acts like the quote-unquote dad of the group, in which he's kind of always watching over everyone, making sure everybody's okay. And even Giorno, although at first he doesn't like him as much, he ends up liking him a lot more later on as the part goes through. And I think they actually do a pretty good job of tackling some of the themes with this character. I mean, he's really depressed and feels a lot of regret over the fact that his partner got killed in his place when he should have been the one that died. So he's always pretty much worrying about the group and making sure that all of his friends are okay because he doesn't want any more of his friends dying. There's also the fact that he's hard on Giorno because he doesn't really trust him as much at first like everybody else does, although he has good reason because the last time he sat down and trusted some random stranger through bribing the criminal from earlier, from his flashback, that criminal was the one that ended up getting his partner killed. So I can see why Abbacchio doesn't necessarily trust everybody right away. It's fine. It's perfectly understandable. The guy's been through some shit. He has reasons to not like Giorno at first. And I feel like we as the reader should understand this and try not to be too mad at Abbacchio for being upset with Giorno, although he can be a little over the top at times. He only does it because he's concerned for everybody else as well as himself. And aside from this, we don't really see too much of Abbacchio throughout the rest of the part. He kind of just is around there to give background dialogue and commentary and interactions with the rest of the cast. But by the time we get to Man in the Mirror, we understand that Abbacchio ends up trusting Giorno more after figuring out everything that went on with that fight and all the shit with Purple Haze and Fugo. He actually ends up liking the guy. Because by this point, he can see why Bruno and everybody else trusted him so much, thinking that he was actually a genius. I mean, Giorno made anti-venom to combat the disease of Purple Haze while they were taking out the Man in the Mirror user, whose name I forget. Forgive me. Somebody correct me down below in the comments. And then after that, the next time Abbacchio does anything is when they're trying to track down the boss, in which the boss ends up disguising himself as a kid playing a game of soccer. When Abbacchio goes to give the kids back said soccer ball, he's kind of just dead. The dude gets a giant fucking hole punched through his stomach when he tries to do one thing to help the group. It's kind of really sad actually, and he ends up being the first one dead out of the group despite how much he cared about everybody else and not wanting everybody else to die. He ends up being the first one to go. And it sucks too that he just kind of dies so suddenly. I mean, he gets caught up in the middle of a fight between the boss and somebody else, and then he ends up getting killed without having any idea that he was even dead. And then the rest of the group ends up finding him, and their reactions to it is just heart-wrenching. Giorno's upset that he couldn't sit down and do anything about it. Rantia's crying and screaming and shit. Mista can't even talk, and he doesn't even want to look at Abbacchio. And Bucciolati's just trying to keep everything together while mourning for his friend. And considering this is pretty much just his character, that's it. That's all that happens. It's actually ridiculously sad, and I feel like Abbacchio would have gotten a little more appreciation from people had he done more. Now, when it comes to Abbacchio being involved, since this was pretty much his whole character, there wasn't really much else he could do aside from being the support role, considering that his stand isn't necessarily meant for battle. And I feel like had he been involved in more fights, maybe, then we would have probably, as readers, been a little more upset at his death like everybody else was. Because quite frankly, the characters are upset because that was their friend and he kind of just dies out of nowhere and nobody noticed anything happen until they see his dead body, in which anybody would probably freak out and be like, holy shit, dude, what? How did he die? But as the reader, since I don't have this same connection to the character because I felt like they could have maybe had him do a little more just to flesh him out, I'm not as sad, although it's still pretty messed up shit, don't get me wrong. I think it's actually pretty tragic. But I feel like the biggest thing that Abbacchio suffered from in the end was the fact that he didn't get as much screen time as I think he should have in regards of him actually quote-unquote doing stuff. And you guys know what I mean by doing stuff. I mean being involved in fights and a bunch of huge plot things, aside from occasionally disagreeing or agreeing with somebody in the group and saying something and being like, hey, pee a sword in the balls. But overall, how do you guys feel about Abbacchio? I think more people should have maybe paid a little more attention to him, although I myself am guilty of not paying as much attention to him throughout the part until going back to look up stuff for this video. Do you guys like him? Do you guys hate him? Do you guys think he had a cool stand and a cool design? Do you guys think he should have been involved in more? Let me know down below in the comments, as well as pick any of the other Vento Aureo characters that I haven't sat down and made a solo video on, which I don't think I've done for any of these guys. So go ahead and pick anybody out of the Vento Aureo cast, whether it be a main character or a villain, and I might sit down and talk about them next time and we can get a little bit of a discussion going. I just wanted to sit down and bring up the fact that Abbacchio kind of has a lot more going to him than we gave him credit for, maybe at first. With that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. And also remember, P is stored in the balls. Anybody that tells you otherwise is lying to you. Don't listen to them.